Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and today we're going to be talking about the successor chapters of the Iron Hands Legion. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day. If you have any suggestions, please comment down below. And if you enjoy our content, thank our patrons on Patreon. Their simple $1 a month contribution really helps out the channel. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the successor chapters of the Iron Hands. The prideful first founding legion known as the Iron Hands is one of the Imperium's most honorable and powerful Astartes legions. Renowned for their cold-hearted brutality and remorselessness in battle, the Iron Hands have earned respect not only of their fellow Space Marine battle brothers, but also the many Imperial Adepta, most notably the Adeptus Mechanicus. Sons of the deceased Primarch Varus Manus, each battle brother belonging to one of the Legion's successor chapters, carries with them the gene seed of the Gorgon and their father's tremendous passion. Although the Imperium does not have a full report on how many Iron Hand successor chapters have existed since the second founding, the information collected from the Adeptus Administratum, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and various other sources can guarantee the lineage of 6 successor chapters currently operating within the Imperium. While all Medusans are different, there seems to be a few common traits present in all successor chapters. That is the inherent urge to purge any perceived weakness, including their bodies. They believe even the genetically enhanced transhuman space marine organic bodies are ultimately frail and subject to the weakness brought on by age and disease. They are compulsively driven to replace their own biological flesh with cybernetic replacements. Most commonly, the left hand is surgically removed and replaced with a bionic prosthetic in a ritual inspired by a tale of Varus Manus' own hand becoming encased in living metal after the mythical battle with a great serpent on Medusa, which was composed of the same material. Along with a detest of any trace of weakness, most successors of the Iron Hands have a strong bond with the Adeptus Mechanicus and believe in the teachings of the machine cult. Many will answer the call of war if a Forge World is in need. One of the Iron Hands' rarest successor chapters is the Iron Lords chapter. The Iron Lords were responsible for driving back the hyper-aggressive Xenos race known as the Bargashi. The chapter fought valiantly and ultimately confined the alien species by forming a blockade around the Grundle stars, until the Imperium could find a way to exterminate the Xenos for good. So violent were the Bargashi that the sinister Dark Eldar often raided their worlds in order to collect slaves for their brutal gladiatorial arenas of Kamara. It was reported that the Iron Lord suffered terrible losses during the judgment of Hellenes, when Inquisitor Hector Rax assumed direct control over the entire 279th Assault Armada of the Imperial Navy, ordered the mutant population of Hellenes purged for crimes against genetic purity. At the height of this purge, a combined strike force consisting of Space Marines from the Iron Lords, Skullbearers, and the Sons of Guilliman were gathered together to confront the mutant abominations holding the capital. During this confrontation, the Iron Lords' contingent became tainted by the mutant hideous gene taint, forcing the fellow Space Marines to purge them as well. In recent years, the Iron Lords have battled the tendrils of Tyranid Highfleet Kraken as it swept through the Node system, leading the Iron Hands to engage one desperate battle after another with an ever greater swarm of bioengineered horrors. The Imperium's fear is that should the Kraken be allowed to assimilate the genetic potential of the Bargashi, the results would be devastating for the galaxy. The Iron Lords have vowed in the name of the Emperor to prevent this at all cost, a vow they will honor with the life of every single battle brother in their chapter, if needed. The chapter's last reported campaign was late in the 41st millennium, when they answered the summon of Marnius Calgar and helped throw back the expansion of the Tau Empire in the Zeitz campaign. With the Iron Lords being reinforced with Primaris Marines, the chapter is expected to bolster their war efforts in the surrounding sectors. Their distinct black and red power armor, and the Iron Lord's chapter badge of a silver fist gripping the bottom of a white iron halo on a field of black, is a sign of great honor for the chapter as they purge the galaxy of Xenos. Another known successor chapter of the Iron Hands is the mysterious Iron Fists. Very little is shared of this chapter, aside from their chapter's colors, which are a light blue-gray-silver with a golden gauntlet in the shape of a clenched fist, centered on either a field of black or silver power armor. It is rumored that it was the Iron Fist who first developed the extended-range variety of a missile for the Whirlwind. The Tech Marines of the Iron Fist chapter developed this missile to turn the short-range support of a Whirlwind into long-range bombardment artillery during the assault of High Vortis. It was not really regarded as a success, but several other chapters have since attempted to emulate the Iron Fist. The necessary increase in fuel and the size of the missile's rocket engine resulted in a reduction of the amount of high explosive carried in the warhead and a reduction in the size of the resulting explosion. The loss of destructive power means that the long-range missile failed to cause sufficient damage to be effective in a bombardment role. The chapter is also known for using massive mobile fortresses known as land behemoths to travel across the surface of their homeworld, much like their parent chapter. Little else is known about the chapter in the Imperial records. The Adeptus Mechanicus have on numerous occasions taken advantage of the bond with the Iron Hands and their successor chapters. Such was the case for the Steel Confessors. Sometime during the 36th millennium, the Adeptus Mechanicus found itself besieged by the various threats plaguing mankind. While their Scutari cohorts unquestionably fought for the safety of the various forge worlds in the galaxy, the Admech believed that they needed something stronger to protect their interest and rival the strength and power of any other Imperial force. They took it upon themselves to create a secret chapter of Space Marines that only bore loyalty to Mars and the Cult Mechanicus. Understanding that out of the loyalist Primarchs, only Ferrus Manus and his sons, the Iron Hands, maintained the closest belief system to that of the Cult Mechanicus, and so they took the tithe gene seed of this loyalist first founding legion, and without permission from the High Lords of Terra, they created the Steel Confessors. Clad in metallic silver with green trim, and bearing the chapter's badge of the black cross-lead, with a white lightning bolt surmounted in the middle of a red oval, the Steel Confessors were introduced to the Imperium during the 19th Space Marine founding. Unfortunately for the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Inquisition discovered their secret scheme to create the private Space Marine chapter that was the Steel Legion, and reported the act to the High Lords of Terra. After much deliberation, the High Lords decreed that despite the Adeptus Mechanicus having greatly overstepped their mandate, they would be allowed to keep this newly created chapter, with certain limitations of course. The Steel Confessors were first required to take the same vows of fealty and loyalty to the Imperium of Man that bound all Space Marine chapters, and to separate itself organizationally from the Adeptus Mechanicus so that it operated as a truly independent chapter, just like all the others. Though the Mechanicus was not well pleased by this edict of the High Lords, they begrudgingly agreed to Terra's terms so as to avoid a potential conflict which both Mars and Terra could ill afford in the tumultuous days of the 36th millennium, known as the Age of Apostasy. Because of the Adeptus Mechanicus' influence on the chapter, the Steel Confessors are organized predominantly according to the tenets of the Codex Astartes, though they do incorporate some of the atypical organizational elements used by the Iron Hands. The Steel Confessors divided the chapter up into 10 standard companies, rather than the clad companies as the Iron Hands do. The Steel Confessors do not incorporate the specialist rank of the Iron Hands, known as the Iron Father, within their chapter, preferring to keep the two traditional Astartes specialties of Chaplain and Tech Marine separate, as in most other chapters. However, all of the Steel Confessors company captains are also trained to serve as both Artificers and Tech Marines. The chapter master of the Steel Confessors is traditionally chosen by a council composed of the chapter's company captains, chaplains, librarians, and dreadnoughts. In the event of a tie vote between the two candidates, the 5 most senior sergeants within the chapter then cast their vote. Because of their close relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Steel Confessors are provided with an excellent supply of the finest heavy arms, armor, war machines, and equipment that the manufactorums of Mars can currently produce. Like their forebearers among the Iron Hands, the Steel Confessors are utterly intolerant of physical or mental weaknesses in others, and the least of all in themselves. This harsh discipline has gone to some extreme situations, like when the chapter actually destroyed the Talaran 54th Regiment of the Imperial Guard for failure to achieve objectives. This intolerance of weakness manifests most notably in the distinct preference for high levels of cybernetic replacements of healthy portions of their bodies with augmetic bionics, which is quite a commonplace practice within the chapter, as it is in other Iron Hand successors. Spiritually, the chapter believes in a divine trinity that is a modified version of the faith held by the Adeptus Mechanicus. This trinity is composed of the Machine God, the universal spirit of knowledge that provides strength to all, and the Emperor of Mankind, who stands as the physical embodiment of knowledge incarnate, and the Machine God in the universe as the Omnissiah. And finally, their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, the greatest prophet of the machine god. The majority of the other Space Marine chapters frown upon the Steel Confessors' obscene reverence for the mechanical and the physical embodiment of knowledge, just as they frown upon those chapters who adopt the Imperial Creed and revere the Emperor as a god rather than as a father, an inspiration, and humanity's greatest guide. In the 41st millennium, the Imperium encountered the first Tyranid Hive Fleet, which was designated Hive Fleet Behemoth. This encounter was also the first contact the Imperium had with the Tyranid race. Hive Fleet Behemoth emerged from the galactic southeast of the Eastern Fringe in the Ultima Segmentum without warning and plowed like an unstoppable juggernaut into the realm of the Imperium, devastating hundreds of star systems and devouring everything in its path. Compared to later Hive Fleets that adopted a variety of strategies as they faced Imperial resistance, Behemoth showed no subtlety in its nearly berserker initial advance. Unfortunately for the Steel Confessors, their original chapter homeworld, the Forge World of Craxus IV, stood in the path of the Great Devourer and was soon attacked by the ravenous swarm of these foul Xenos. Though they fought valiantly, the planet soon fell to the Behemoth, forcing the Confessors to make a hasty withdrawal, lest they suffer the complete annihilation of their chapter. Chapter Master Protonus was killed during the defense of the planet, valiantly holding the line so the last of his battle brothers could escape the Doom World. His body was recovered and was later buried on Kalevala alongside the remains of the Steel Confessor's first chapter master, Avonus. When the Tyranid menace was finally stopped and defeated at the Battle of Macragge by the Ultramarines and the Imperial Navy's Battlefleet Ultima, the Steel Confessors were granted a new homeworld by the Imperium upon the Forge World of Kalevala. Unfortunately for the chapter, a new Tyranid menace assaulted their new homeworld. The battle for Kalevala was once again fought on the Steel Confessors' own homeworld against the invading Tyranids, though this time the chapter determined that there would be a very different outcome when they faced off against this great devourer. The entire chapter of the Steel Confessors successfully engaged in battle against the Tyranids of Leviathan. The world of Kalevala was home to the Steel Confessors' Fortress Monastery, their chapter's gene seed stores, and a major Adeptus Mechanicus Manufactorum, as well as a full psychic choir of astropaths that boosted the Astronomicon to allow navigation through the difficult currents in the Immaterium created by the Tyranid hive mind's psychic shadow in the warp. This being the chapter's homeworld, there was no other choice other than to defend it in open battle from the forces of Tyranid Hive Fleet Leviathan. The battle was colossal and brutally straightforward, with each of the 10 companies of the Steel Confessors taking up defensive positions around the Mechanicus Manufactorums and their fortress monastery, while the Tyranid horde attacked unrelentingly in an attempt to overwhelm the Astartes' firing lines. Despite the incalculable number of Tyranid presence on Kalevala, the disciplined regime of volley fire from the Steel Confessors' tactical marines and the Devastator squads, combined with surgical counterattacks by the assault squads, veteran squads of the 1st Company, and land speeder squadrons flying between battlefield locations to lend their firepower to those companies that were struggling. Eventually, it thinned the Tyranid horde while minimizing Space Marine casualties. The Tyranids finally depleted their own numbers after constantly throwing themselves without regard into the sustained fire of Astarte guns. At the end of the battle, the 8th and 10th companies of the Steel Confessors had been utterly wiped out, and the 1st Company was at 40% operational strength, and the 3rd and 6th Company were at 60%, while the rest of the chapter's company still possessed between 20 to 40% of their standard operational strength. Yet Kalevala had held against the swarm, and the Leviathan soon moved on to seek easier prey. The Steel Confessors still had possession of their homeworld, and there would be no repeat of the humiliation that had been suffered in their previous homeworld. One of the oldest successor chapters of the Iron Hands was the Brazen Claws. The Loyalist Space Marine chapter, known as the Brazen Claws, can trace their lineage to the Stoic Primarch Ferrus Manus and his original Iron Hands Legion. The chapter was created during the Second Founding, when the Loyalist legions were broken up into smaller factions under the directions of Guilliman's Codex Astarte. But the history and battle honors of the Battle Brothers that would become the Brazen Claws chapter were long and well-deserved. The Brazen Claws were made up of the Iron Hands 34th Clan Company of Clan Moragul, meaning that many of the initial chapter's Space Marine warriors fought during the Great Crusade, when the Emperor still walked amongst man. The Morgul clan was a large clan composed of the outcast and the most unstable elements of the Iron Hands Legion. They were led by Altek Mor, who was both the Iron Lord of the clan and the Iron Father of the entire Legion. He would later go on to become the chapter master of the Red Talons chapter during the same founding, making the Morgul clan the source of multiple Iron Hand successor chapters. Just like the rest of the Iron Hands Legion, the Battle Brothers of this clan possess a hatred of weakness, a hatred that extended to their own bodies, for they held that all organic bodies, even those of the genetically enhanced transhuman Space Marines, were ultimately frail and subject to the weakness brought on by age and disease. In battle, the clan was unassailable and resolute. It is said that once engaged in combat, they would never yield, fighting on without pity or remorse for either the enemy or their own losses. This culture of grim determination and the drive to replace their own biological flesh with cybernetics are a practice that is still part of the Brazen Claws today. While the Iron Hands suffered terrible losses during the drop site massacre on Isfan 5, when they were betrayed by their own brothers, the 34th Clan Company was spared from the betrayal due to being stationed on the night world of Fabris Calavant. They were garrisoned there as a way to pay a debt that the Legion owed to the Night House of House Calavant, a friendship that would continue with the chapter until the planet's destruction. During the Horus Heresy and on to the Great Scouring, many of the Brazen Claws fought valiantly against the forces of the traitor legions. When the clan was finally formed into its own chapter, they took on the quartered pattern of blue and red as their chapter's colors. They also adopted the clan's ancient icon of a red talon on a field of blue as their chapter badge. The Brazen Claws amassed a long and glorious history, combating those that would threaten the Imperium of Man after the Emperor's ascension. They took on guardianship of the planet of Talos IV, their chapter homeworld, and like many Space Marine chapters with a history as long as the Brazen Claws, not all of their battle honors survived the decay of the Imperium. Their oldest recorded conflict occurred in the mid-37th millennium, when Inquisitor Lord Antius Coil of the Ordo Malleus discovered the location of the nomadic Hellforge, Sauron, while conducting exterminatus action against the warp-tainted hive world of Colondia 9, and moved to see it destroyed. Along with warships committed from Battlefleet Reductus and several Militarum Tempestus regiments, he mobilized the aid of 3 Space Marine chapters, the Sons of the Raven, the Celestial Guard, and the Brazen Claws. Their mission was to strike deep into the perilous Golgotha Waste against the nightmarish thorn in the Imperium side. Within sight of the baleful world, the Imperial fleet was ambushed on all sides by the pale warships of the renegade Warp Ghost and corrupted Blackwing Chaos Space Marines, and the horrific demon engines of the Dark Mechanicus allies of Sarum. In the brutal 17 solar hour void battle that followed, the Imperial fleet was encircled and slowly torn to pieces, both from without and from within, as demons ripped open passages into real space deep on board the Stoic vessel. Only the chapter fleet of the Brazen Claws broke free from the trap without crippling losses, while the human contingents of the Imperium strike force were completely annihilated. The Imperium doesn't have solid records of the Brazen Claw chapter until the early part of the 39th millennium, when they entered the Pilgaron cluster to besiege a renegade stronghold on Phalax. They lost 3 squads from their 3rd company, and a demonic surge destroyed the mind of the librarian leading the assault. Their complex strategy was in disarray, but due to the heroic Devastator Centurions, the demons were kept at bay. An evacuation was made possible only by the firepower of the Centurions. This became known as the Devil's Claw Incident. In the 41st millennium, the Brazen Claws answered the call of Iron Father Cardan Stronus as he led the full might of the Iron Hands and the Brazen Claws chapter against the Necron dynasty of the Crimson King. Stronus refused to fall back in the face of massive counterattacks, and alongside the Iron Hands Garsak clan company, he somehow fought his way to strike the Crimson King a mortal blow and shatter the Necron's command structure. In the later half of the 41st millennia, tragedy struck the chapter once more, as the bloodthirsty horde of demons assaulted the chapter's homeworld of Talos IV. Although the Brazen Claws fought valiantly, the demons consumed the planet and forced the chapter to fall back. Despite direct orders to the contrary from the High Lords of Terra, the Brazen Claws launched a counter-strike they considered a crusade of vengeance into the Eye of Terror itself, in response to the forces of Chaos' assault upon their homeworld. The Brazen Claws' last astropathic transmission indicated that the chapter was engaging a fleet of Iron Warrior vessels, but no other trace was heard from them for long solar decades. Thought destroyed in the Eye of Terror, the Brazen Claws resurfaced near Cadia, battered but still fighting their long war against chaos late in the 41st millennium. It was their chapter master, Call, who ordered the chapter out of the Eye after a subjective 20 standard years of combat against the traitor legions. The chapter had suffered the loss of at least 2 companies. After 20 years of hubris, pride, and death, the chapter master called the entirety of the chapter to council aboard his flagship to discuss whether or not it would be prudent to continue prosecuting this crusade. Out of 10 companies, only 400 Space Marines of the Brazen Claws were able to attend. The chapter master stared out at his gathered chapter, at his battered men. There were gaps in squads, gaps in companies, once filled by men he had known and called brother. Even now, even standing at attention, they could not remain still. Their limbs danced, machineries grinding, clanking, ill-maintained, their bodies beset by random flashes of neuronic misfire as the Eye of Terror's chaotic energies slowly wore away at their minds. After much debate and the sage wisdom of the chapter's surviving captains, the chapter master told his chapter that their crusade was at an end. He then ordered his men to prepare to depart the Eye for the realm of man. To the Brazen Claw's surprise, though only 20 standard years passed for them in the Eye, almost 40 had gone by in real space. Such are the effects of the warp. Little is known of the Brazen Claws after that, but Lord Castellan Creed of Cadia insists that the chapter was sighted on numerous battlefields around the fortress world of the Cadian Gate during the 13th Black Crusade, fighting against the forces of chaos led by Abaddon the Despoiler. It was in that capacity that a great portion of the Brazen Claw's strength responded to the distress calls from Cadia during the world's last days. Tragically, the majority of the chapter arrived too late to participate in the conflict, instead diverting to the worlds around the Cadian Gate, where they rode out the tragic opening of the Great Rift and lent their might to the defense of such planets as Goodrun and Thracian Primaris. The chapter would later receive aid as their ranks were bolstered with Primaris Marines. They would then participate in the fall of Medusa 5. As was shared before, the Red Talons are another ancient successor chapter of the 10th Legion.
The Red Talons are a loyalist Space Marine chapter and a second founding successor chapter of the Iron Hands. The Red Talons were founded from a portion of the Iron Hands Legion's Moragul clan, made up of primarily of outcasts and the most unstable elements of the 10th Legion, who fought and died under the merciless command of their bloody-handed clan commander, the Iron Lord Otek Mor. The Red Talons primarily wear arterial red color power armor. The Aquila or Imperialis is silver. The Red Talon's chapter badge is a crimson talon, centered on a black roundel. This symbol is reminiscent of the distinctive crimson heraldry of the Iron Lord Otek Mor's personal guard, the blood wrought, as well as the clan company icon of the Moragul clan of the Iron Hands Legion of old. The Red Talons can trace their heritage back to the dark days of the galaxy-wide rebellion known as the Horus Heresy, which began in the waning days of the Great Crusade in the late 30th millennium. This bloody-handed chapter is descended from the ranks of the infamous Moragul clan company, led by Otek Mor, who was both Iron Lord of the clan and the Iron Father of the 10th Legion. Mor held a sinister reputation within his legion. The dark rumors accompanied him long before the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, including whispered accusations that the origins of his gene seed, or perhaps his bloodline, were not as they should be. A Terran by birth, he was part of the 10th Legion's first intake and fought in the reconquest of the Sol System. He held field command by the time of its Primarch's finding on the world of Medusa, having already developed a reputation both as a weaponsmith and as a malevolent soul. Mor was known to have killed several members of his own legion in duels over slights of honor, and to rule his company with a cruel and unforgiving fist. On the 10th Legion's new homeworld, Medusa, he took over the outlaw Ragula clan's Leviathan crawler in a bloody night of violence, and made himself its lord, imprinting on it his name and will. In the years that followed, his Moragul clan became a sink for the outcast and most unstable elements of the Iron Hands Legion, who fought and died under Mor's merciless command. No love was lost between Otek Mor and his Primarch. Despite the enmity between the Primarch and the Lord of the Morgul clan, when his Grand Cruiser, the Red Talon, arrived on Isstvan V, when the Void Battle was at its height, he bravely attempted to go to aid his Primarch. During the infamous events, which would become known in Imperial history as the Dropsite Massacre, 3 Loyalist Astartes legions, the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, and the Raven Guard, were betrayed by 4 other legions of the Loyalist Second Wave, sent to defeat Horus's traitors at Isstvan V, the Alpha Legion, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, and a large contingent of Wordbearers. The Red Talon flagship of the Iron Hands Morgul clan was one of the first Iron Hand vessels to arrive in the Isstvan system after the treachery of the Loyalist reserves, breaching into real space amid the titanic space battle that had erupted between the Loyalist and the traitor fleets. Autek Mor ordered his ship to attempt to breach through the firestorm to reach the surface of Isstvan V, and the infamously powerful Grand Cruiser succeeded in punching through the battle, but took such heavy damage that it was forced to bypass Isstvan V and flee, managing to escape, unlike many of the Iron Hand ships that would later arrive. Of the Iron Hand Legion, it was known that many had been driven to stark madness by witnessing their father's end, and thrown themselves wholesale into the crucible of war as if to absolve their loss in their own death. Yet a substantial number of Iron Hand legionnaires had extricated themselves from the massacre, and while few had made it off the surface, many more had survived the calamitous void ambush of the Legion's fleet, breaking away and scattering across the stars. Some would form isolationist bands, fighting their own private wars against the traitors, such as the infamous Red Talons of Autek Mor. When the Red Talons were just a warband, one of their most notable campaigns took place in the Coronated Deeps, within the Geth's main system, more than a year previously in the year 5 of the 31st millennium. The Geth's main system had submitted to Horus without resistance, and this obedience had thus spared them the worst of the war's attrition. The system's only inhabited world, Geth's main colonists, had been forced to suffer newly imposed overlords in the shape of Tithe Acquisinors, bearing the Serpent's Eye of Horus, where once they had the Raptor Head Seal of Terra. Under their direction, the industries of Geth's main now labored, and the planet's vast rainforests were being cut to provide fodder for the off-world exports. But other than the Inquisitor's harsh quota, little in truth had changed for the people of Geth's main. But just as the unexpected arrival of a lone survivor from the Isstvan system in the year 6 of the 31st millennium had gone on to herald the dawning of a terrible war that was to follow, so now, with fell irony, was a second survivor of the great treachery to herald a new wave of conflict. When the ill-starred warp route from the haunted Grail abyss tore open once more, the vessel that cut into real space with dreadful purpose was no derelict comparison in the Emperor's Children Emirath, as the first survivor ship had been, but a jagged and scar-hauled killer in black iron and blood crimson. This was an Iron Hand vessel. It was the Red Talon, the ship of the Iron Hands clan Morgul and his master, Autek Mor. Geth's main had been stripped of much of its void defenses in the traitor's passing, and now it stood all but naked before the specter of the Imperium's great retribution. A few remaining gun platforms which protected Geth's main colonists were quickly swept away by the attacking Grand Cruiser. The ruthless bombardment of the planet from low orbit immediately commenced preparation for a ground assault. Then came the grim Sons of Medusa to enact judgment. Any resistance to the Iron Hands was swiftly obliterated, and an entire cohort of planetary militia and their Horsite overseers crushed beneath the tread of Clan Morgul's armor in less than an hour. Wasting no time, seats of government were blasted to rubble, and those in positions of power that had aided the traitors or sided with their cause were methodically hunted down and executed, except for a select number of prisoners deemed to have potential useful information, who were dragged screaming back to the Red Talon's gunships. As the Iron Hands Thunderhawks blasted from the surface, the bulk of the civilian population, which had fled into hiding during the sudden assault, nervously rejoiced and came forth, little knowing what would come next. In each of the 5 major cities of Gethsemane, the Iron Hands had left behind an improvised automatic device, fashioned by the bloody hands of their Iron Father. Each bomb clad in layer upon layer of radioactive material, designed to enrich and multiply the fallout that generated by its detonation 100 times fold. The Red Talons broke orbit just as the cities bloomed into fire. Sentence had been passed on both the traitors and those who had knelt before them. The notice served that there would be no bystanders in this terrible war, no civilians to be given quarter, only loyalists and traitors to the death. Aside from their notable founding, the Red Talons are known for the defense of Orask. At the very edge of the Ithaquan Deeps, in the northern segmentum Ultima, near the border of the Ghoul Stars, sits the sentinel feudal world of Orask. This vital bastion had long defended the Equinath Deeps against the fell horrors of the Ghoul Stars. In recent times, a most terrible assault occurred in the year 940 of the 41st millennium, when a splinter High Fleet Python of the Tyranid Menace approached, disoriented and twisted by its passage through the Ghoul Stars, and fell on Orask's system like a ravenous beast. The great battle that ensued proved brief but bloody. The stoic defenders of Orask were backed by a full company of the Red Talons chapter and a Titan maniple from the Legio Magna. Despite horrific casualties that reached into the tens of thousands, sustained within a mere matter of solar days, the valiant defenders were able to push back their monstrous attackers. Eventually, they contained the threat and purged the vile Xenos from Orask's blasted surface. In recognition of their hard-fought victory, the Senatorium Ultima of Ultramar honored the chapter with a gift of the famed relic known as the Bloody Crown of Haikini. However, evidence persists that some Harbinger organisms escaped to the outer system, and Orask may not have heard the last of the Great Devourer.
And finally, the Sons of Medusa are the last verified successor chapters of the Iron Hands.
The Sons of Medusa is a loyalist successor chapter of the Space Marines, drawn from the unforgiving Iron Hands chapter. It is a chapter with a history of ruthless efficiency and the merciless persecution of the Imperium of man's foes. Like their forebearers, they are extreme devotees of the Emperor of mankind, and look with disgust upon those who lack their strength of will. The Sons of Medusa were originally depicted in a dark green color scheme. In their contemporary color scheme, they are depicted with emerald green power armor, white helmets, and black trim. The Sons of Medusa's chapter badge was originally a Medusa's head, but was later stylized into a white skull with a black, 8-pointed iron halo surrounding it. The Desert World support squad of the Sons of Medusa use a yellow-brown armor color scheme with vertical black tiger stripes and are deployed with heavy weapons as a Devastator squad. The Sons of Medusa are a highly respected Space Marine chapter with a long history of defending the Imperium from its foes. It has participated in a host of Imperial crusades and has been responsible for the triumphant defense of mankind's worlds from heretics and aliens. However, the glories of the chapter's history mask a darker past for the Sons of Medusa, a secret and turbulent history of heresy and discord. The origins of the chapter lie in the turbulent times of the Nova Terra Interregnum, which took place during the early 35th millennium. This was a period in human history of division and civil war, in which the Imperium became fractured in a number of different warring factions. The Adeptus Mechanicus was also affected during the Interregnum by divisions and internal warfare brought about by doctrinal differences and competing centers of power. One of the most discordant of these conflicts was the Moray Schism, a dogmatic battle between the Martian orthodoxy of the standard cult Mechanicus and a far more radical creed based upon the prophetic writings of the triad of tech mystics from the minor forge world of Moray. The Moray Schism was one of the most decisive and widespread doctrinal conflicts to afflict the Adeptus Mechanicus since the Horus Heresy. These heretical writings spread like wildfire through the domains of the Mechanicus, even after Moray was reduced to a cinder by the Fabricator General of Mars. The Moray Tech Creed was based on the prophetic wave calculation of the triad of tech mystics who believed that they had discerned a series of predictive patterns within the micro-fluctuation of the Astronomicon's psychic beacon. They believed that these geometric patterns contained the word of the Omnissiah and God Emperor, from which the ski of future history and humanity's destinies could be read. These radical teachings included vile references to the future overthrow of the priesthood of Mars and the fusion of the cult Mechanicus and the ecclesiarchy into a unified ecclesiarchal hierarchy. Such claims were predictably treated as dark seditions by the Mechanicus authorities on Mars, and civil war was quickly sparked between the orthodox and radical elements of the Mechanicus. The disruptive creed of Moray quickly gained influence. Within the Mechanicus priesthood, a number of Tech Guard regiments and even some Titan legions caused untold harm before being transmitted further afield to Space Marine chapters with close ties to the Adeptus Mechanicus, and in this, the Iron Hands were no exception. Championed by the infamous Omnissian mystics, the Iron Father Setol Solex, a significant percentage of those within the chapter quickly embraced the Moray doctrines. As discord soon followed, the Iron Hands were faced with the prospect of a full civil war within their chapter. This was only averted by the wise counsel of the Iron Hands' Great Clan Council's intervention to propose a settlement. Though deemed straightforward and harsh, their solution to avoid mass bloodshed within the ranks was a simple one: exile from the Iron Hands' homeworld of Medusa for the minority who had embraced the dissident doctrines, and a binding treaty never to raise their hands against their former brothers, enacted by both sides. It is believed that fully a third of the Iron Hand brethren then departed, eventually joined in time by a handful of Space Marines from other Iron Hand successor chapters, who shared their common beliefs in the Moray doctrines, although evidence exists that some, such as the Red Talons, mercilessly destroyed their errant brothers over this matter, rather than suffer the dissident to live. These exiles still saw themselves as wholly a part of the Imperium of Man, and still full members of the Iron Hands. Therefore, they still sought to perform the God Emperor's given duty, and destroy the enemies of the Imperium. Operating as though still a part of their mother chapter, the Iron Hands exiles continued to increase their numbers and strengths, condemning their gene seed to higher imperial authorities among the Adeptus Mechanicus and conducting their duties. They continued to use the iconography and signature equipment of the Iron Hands, from which they had been outcast, with some minor variations, having further divided themselves into 3 new clan companies to support their steady increase in numbers. In the early years of the 37th millennium, matters continued in this vein until the dawning of the Age of Redemption. During this period of the Age of the Imperium, the newly resurgent High Lords of Terra reassembled the disparted strands of anarchy that had ravaged the Emperor's realm, and purged what could not be saved. The Moray exiles of the Iron Hands, now a separate chapter in all but name, were weighed and judged, their records examined in minute detail, as was their gene seed for unworthiness, chaotic taint, or mutational deviance. The exiles were found to be loyal and untainted. As a result, by a special edict of the High Lords of Terra, the Sons of Medusa were reorganized and ratified as a chapter of the Adeptus Astartes within the Emperor's grace. Despite protests within the Adeptus Mechanicus, and the grave misgiving held by numerous other Space Marine chapters at this violation of the standard practice for founding a new chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. Over the following centuries, the Sons of Medusa have earned a reputation for standing against the Emperor's foe, no matter how desperate the odds, winning for themselves a grudging respect, if not trust, of their other fellow Space Marines. Yet their reputation has been long marred by those who call the Sons of Medusa battlefield scavengers and carrion crows. During their lean years in exile, the chapter developed the habit of seeking out and appropriating weapons and technology from the fallen. It is said of the chapter by their detractor that the desire to take war gear from the dead remains an underlining motive of all their actions, and a principal reason they have never shunned combat against those Space Marine chapters who have turned renegade or become subject to censure by the High Lords of Terra. Although the Sons of Medusa were ultimately founded as a result of the Moray Schism, it is unknown just how many of the Moray tech mystic teachings they still cling on to for more than the 5 millennia later. What is certain is that many factions of the Adeptus Mechanicus still view them with suspicion, and their forebearers, the Iron Hands, treat them with cold civility at best. In their character, the Sons of Medusa owe much to their forebearers, being utterly intolerant of physical or mental weakness in others, and least of all in themselves. This obsession manifests most notably in a distinct preference for high levels of cybernetic replacements amongst their battle brothers. Those who have fought alongside the chapter remark that they possess a frigid manner and seemingly emotionless response, taking little pleasure in success. Unlike many other Astartes, the Sons of Medusa do not crave glory or expect to prove their worthiness to their chapter. Failure to the Sons of Medusa is intolerable, and slights against the chapter's honor, perceived or real, are met with deadly force, while defeats are viewed as things to be recited and avenged. To an Astarte of the Sons of Medusa, doing otherwise would be a show of weakness, and weakness is death. In temperament, the battle brothers of the Sons of Medusa display the same demeanor as the Iron Hands. They abhor the weakness of flesh, and while they encase their bodies in cold steel, they are blessed of a hatred of the Emperor's foe, far hotter than any furnace. Given their crusading roots during and immediately following the Nova Terra Interregnum, it is not surprising that the Sons of Medusa display an even keener urge to prosecute the Emperor's foe than their sires. Like their forebearers amongst the Iron Hands, the Sons of Medusa have a particular hatred for weakness in any form. This has had a marked effect on their combat doctrine. Like their former Iron Hand brethren, this hatred is extended to the physical body, seeing weakness even in themselves despite their obviously superior augmented superhuman physiques. It is not unknown for an Astarte of this chapter to further enhance himself through biochemical and cybernetic means, including the replacement of otherwise healthy limbs and organic body parts with bionic. The Sons of Medusa are ferocious in battle, always advancing forward in a relentless automaton-like manner, no matter how desperate the odds, throwing themselves violently at the enemy as they are overcome by a bitter, righteous anger at those who would defy the will of the Emperor and the Omnissiah. The Sons of Medusa differ somewhat from their prescription of the Codex Astarte in combat structure, while remaining true to its tenets at the tactical and squad level. The chapter follows a unique organizational pattern derived in part from their progenitor, the Iron Hands chapter. The chapter is divided into 3 war clans, each of which is further divided into a battle company, a tactical company, and a support company, rather than the usual division into 10 companies of 100 Astarte each. The battle and tactical companies conform roughly to their codex equivalents, while the support company comprises a mixture of Devastator, Assault, and Veteran squads. The chapter also does not maintain a dedicated scout company as required by the dictates of the codex. Instead, each of the war clans maintains a body of neophytes and initiates, which is considered to be an auxiliary force. Like all chapters, the actual strength of the Sons of Medusa can vary greatly based upon current levels of attrition in the ranks and status of its scout force. The scout force in particular can vary in size, as the chapter is notoriously harsh on its neophytes, brooking no signs of weakness or failure in them. For those who do not live up to the harsh standards of the chapter, those that falter or fail in the judgment of their masters, the fate of a mindless cybernetic servitor in the chapter's forges is the best that they can hope for. In a pattern similar to their forebearers, the Sons of Medusa maintain a non-standard clan structure, which overlays the more traditional pattern of Space Marine organization found within the Codex Astarte. Whereas the Iron Hands are formed of 10 clan companies associated with their homeworld of Medusa's nomadic city caravans, the Sons of Medusa maintain 3 war clans, the Lachesis, the Magra, and the Atropos, which were established by the chapter's founder, Iron Father Seto Solax, during the Moray Schism. The doctrine and hierarchy within these war clans is largely independent of the others,
but all owe fealty to the larger chapter command structure and the Council of Three and Chamber Ferrum. Each of the war clan's insignias and heraldry varies somewhat from the other, with the Mager war clan utilizing the purest form of the chapter's emerald and white heraldry, the Atropos incorporating further elements of sable black in their heraldry, and the Lachesis preferring silver steel. Beyond these individual signs of differences between the war clans, what dogmatic or strategic variances between them exists, as well as true interplay and seniority of the officers within the chapter, remains utterly impenetrable to outsiders. Each of the war clans is commanded by an officer called an Iron Thane, and each of the three companies within a war clan is commanded by a captain, attended in a subordinate role by a dedicated chaplain as the master of the doctrine and discipline. The Iron Thanes act in concert to control the chapter as its Council of Three, as the chapter has had no single master since the passing of Celto Solax millennia ago. The chapter's Council of Three is further advised by the wisdoms of the ancients, the chapter-honored cadre of venerable dreadnoughts. The chapter's unusually extensive brotherhood of tech marines is known as the Chamber Verum. The members of the Chamber Verum are greater in both number and authority within the Sons of Medusa than the tech marine force found within a standard codex-compliant chapter. The Chamber Ferrum exists outside the structure of the three war clans, and its purpose is to enforce unity, cementing the chapter together as a whole. It is the tech marines of the Chamber Ferrum who maintain supplies of vital war material to the chapter's dispersed strike forces. The Chamber Ferrum further manages the disposition of the chapter's fleet, and holds with it the chapter's apothecarion and command of its forges and other facilities. As befits a scion chapter of the Iron Hands, the level of technology and weaponry used by the Sons of Medusa chapter is higher than the imperial average, even among the usually well-equipped Astartes, and their armory is particularly extensive and diverse. The chapter's forge ships are known to be able to salvage, repair, and produce a wide variety of Adeptus Astarte war gear. Their range of technology is thought to include the extremely rare capability to construct new dreadnought chassis, and build some of the rare Land Raider variants, such as the Land Raider Prometheus. Like their forebearer among the Iron Hands, the Sons of Medusa have a particular hatred for weakness in any form. This has had a marked effect on their combat doctrine. Like their former Iron Hand brethren, this hatred is extended to their physical body, seeing weakness even in themselves, despite their obviously superior augmented superhuman physique. It is not unknown for an Astarte of this chapter to further enhance himself through biomechanical and cybernetic means, including the replacement of otherwise healthy limbs and organic body parts with bionics. In the year 182 of the 38th millennium, the mighty Belwrath Crusade was launched to liberate and dominate the area of space designated as the Lana Rifts in the northwestern fringes of the Segmentum Pacificus, from the hands of the Xenos and heretics. This crusade, one of the largest of its kind in centuries, was conducted by well over 25 million levied Imperial Guard troops, with unknown numbers of pilgrims and hanger-ons swept on in its wake. The crusade was further augmented by 2 Titan legions and 8 Space Marine chapters of various times, with the Sons of Medusa being the most active. The chapter was heavily engaged during much of the crusade with an unknown Xeno species. Within 50 standard years of its inception, the crusade began to falter, and it was at this time that the Sons of Medusa would win the greatest victory of the crusade against the twisted alien race the Imperium named the Helgramites. The chapter circumvented the aliens' attack fleet and conducted a perilous counterattack, striking at the heart of their domain in the star system, codename Wormgeir. Using the arcane science of their Explorator Magos allies from the Adeptus Mechanicus, the chapter's modified fleet, which used modified warp drives that repelled the archaic fire that shielded Wormgeir. It provided them with a measure of defense for a time, and allowed them to catch their enemy unaware. With time running out, the Sons of Medusa gathered the might of the entire chapter and plunged headlong into the heart of the Helgramite throne world. The chapter's attack was as relentless as it was merciless. It was said that the Sons of Medusa killed and killed again, methodically and coldly destroying the vile Xenos creatures, firing until they exhausted the promethium in their flamers, and all their bolter shells were spent. Still they continued the merciless slaughter, with combat blades and chainswords, and even when these dulled and failed, with anything they could find to wield, or just their bare power fists, they fought on. The onslaught continued until the alien-templed cities were painted with a foul pale ichor and served the Helgramites for blood, and half their world had been smashed to ruin. Only then did the Sons of Medusa withdraw. Having torn the heart from the enemy, both militarily and spiritually, the Helgramites' resistance collapsed. In a handful of years, they were no more. Within a century, a great swaths of the Lana Rifts were brought under imperial dominion, and the Sons of Medusa entered the mythology of the new sector's inhabitants, whispered of in the old tales of the Emerald Death that fell from the stars to punish the God Emperor's foes.
While all successor chapters of the Iron Hands possess a grim determination to perfect themselves in order to purge the Imperium of the Emperor's enemies, they also carry with them the flaw of their Primarch. Iron Hand successors are susceptible to aggression and an unhealthy desire to perfect oneself, making them prey to the Chaos God Khorne and Slaanesh. Many Chaos warbands depicting the Iron Hand's traits have been encountered fighting alongside the forces of She Who Thirsts and the God of Blood. Even the Loyalists who manage to control their rage and desires still suffer from the trauma of the Dropsite Massacre and the loss of their Primarch. In their collective psyche, they harbor resentment for the successor chapters of the Salamanders and the Raven Guard, believing that if those legions could have been stronger, their father would still be alive. And with that grim note, those were the 40 facts on the successors of the Iron Hands. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank our patrons on Patreon for allowing us to create videos in the first place. A simple $1 a month really helps us create videos, so thank you guys if you guys are patrons, and thank you if you're going to become a patron. You guys are awesome. I think I didn't miss any of like the verified Iron Hand successor chapters, but if I did, please comment down in the comment section below. If you guys want to request the next successor chapter video, please do that. And if you guys created your very own chapter based on the Iron Hands, hit us up on either Facebook or Instagram, or even email us at onemindsyndicate1@gmail.com so we can create a video for you guys. And I'm sorry if at any point I said Iron Fists chapter when I was supposed to say Iron Hands. For some reason my brain was doing this weird thing today, and I kept mixing those things up. But yeah, thanks for listening, guys, and I will talk to you tomorrow. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.